So I like to start every show with a few quick questions to help my audience better get to know you. Are you down?
I'm open.
All
Down.
right,
Yes. Let's
let's
go.
do it. All right. So first is, how do you like to start your day? What's your morning ritual like?
Mm. Always changing, but at the moment, I am pregnant. So I wake up and I do some hypnobirthing meditations and then I journal. I've been doing morning pages from the artist way for a long time. And then I pull a card. And then depending on what's going on that day, I usually move my body. Now enter my third trimester. I'm like, oh. But usually I do try to move, but that's
Mhm.
usually the ritual these days.
Love that. What's your what are your arrows?
I am all right except for my bottom left.
Okay. Okay.
And I also have in human design, as do you, but you kind of have a different balance. I have like the gate of extremes. And it basically means that, like, as amazing as ritual and routine can be, it really is going to vary. Like, it's
Yeah.
not really going to be super, super consistent for me.
Yeah. I like want so hard to have a routine. I really really want that, but it doesn't work. So I've had to just let it go. I just had to let it
Yeah,
go.
I
So
know. Yeah, totally. And you're like all the flow. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like all right. So it really messes me up to try and get too too lefty. But I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
Okay, love that. Next is, what's a product you are really enjoying recently? It could be a beauty product, a food product, a supplement, a crystal, a card deck, any physical
Mm,
product.
does clothing count?
Yeah, clothing for sure.
There's a brand called Bumpsuit, and they make like the most comfortable onesies and like workout clothes and flowy clothes for pregnant people. And I've just really enjoyed them.
Love that.
I'm just like getting a new shipment from them all the time. My partner's like, what else have you ordered from Bumpsuit?
Like another
But
package.
another flowy pants situation. But yes, I think that, like, it's as much as, like, so many of my clothes are flowy already, but like when you're pregnant, or at least I felt, it's like those things even become uncomfortable. So it's been nice to just have like really soft, stretchy clothing.
Perfect. Love
Mhm.
that. Yeah, I'm always curious what people are gonna say because I find out about so many different brands
Yeah.
and products when I ask that question. So
Yeah.
that's why I do it. All right, next is human design. What is your
Mhm.
energy type and profile?
I am a projector and my profile is 6'2".
And authority?
Emotional authority.
There we go.
Yeah.
6'2". Love
Hmm.
that. Love that.
Hmm.
I see that. I tend to attract a lot of 6'2s into my like most of my friends are 2 4s, 6'2s, or 4 6s.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Even
So
just sharing like one number with somebody is like, oh, I see that in you.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially the two. And I find just because I need so much alone time,
Yeah.
and my other two friends get it of like, if I'm away for months and you don't hear from me, we're chilling, we're
Okay.
fine. It's the fellow two understanding.
Oh my God, it's so nice
So
to have that understood.
yeah, 100%. And then for astrology, what's your big three? Sun, moon, rising.
Oh my God, I literally always forget this. So I'm gonna see if I can get it right. So I'm Taurus.
Hmm.
My rising is Scorpio and my moon is in Capricorn.
Oh, I love that. That's a
Hmm.
unique combo.
Yeah, and then my partner is a Capricorn, and I think his rising is no, his moon is in Scorpio. But
Mm.
we're like really wondering when our little babe is gonna come. But like, if she comes before a certain date, she's Scorpio, so TBD.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, those are my big three.
Oh, love that. Okay, and then last in this little series is, what's a topic you are really interested in right now? So this could be something you're learning about, you're enjoying learning
Mhm.
about, or you're just thinking about, you're pondering, you're reflecting on a lot. Like what's been on your mind?
Oh my God, everything related to birth. It's just like the biggest rabbit hole of all time for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been amazing. I'm just like, how do our bodies do this? But yeah, reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, having all the doulas, all the midwives, just like really in a whole amazing rabbit hole about that experience.
What's been like the most surprising thing you've learned being in this experience?
Hmm. I think that I think that so I'm giving birth the plan is to give birth at a birthing center. And I have like an amazing group of 7 midwives and 2 doulas. And I feel like so supported. But I think what's so interesting is so much of the education is very much like, how can you like advocate and like really like stand up for what you want in those settings? And like, I've somehow found a setting that like they're totally on the same page. Everything I bring up, I'm like, I want to do this thing. They're like, yeah, that's our practice. Like, duh. And so like, I guess I've been so surprised that like, there's just like so many amazing options. And I don't think I really realized that. I think that I felt like I was have to like fight for my thing, fight for what I wanted, but like there are actually just like such amazing birth team and supporters everywhere. And I just feel so lucky to have found them.
Mhm.
And I also just think that there are a lot of like pretty outdated practices around birth that are really around, for high risk births that are really applied to all of us. And so it's important to kind of understand things and be like, oh, like if I have a low risk birth and like it's I might not need all those things that they usually prescribe. So it's been really just interesting kind of understanding all the different pieces and exactly what I desire it to look like, while also knowing that like everything could change on a dime. And like I've just got to like make a plan and let it go.
Yeah. I mean, it seems very overwhelming. It seems like a very overwhelming space.
It is, and it's also like the most natural thing. I think that's
Yeah.
been like the thing where it's like, oh my God, birth, like, how's it gonna happen? And honestly, our bodies do it. The
Yeah.
baby's like squiggling their way out, and the contractions are literally naturally expelling them. And so, like, the more relaxed and surrendered we are, the more we make ourselves available for it. Obviously, that's not going to always be feasible to do, and so many other things can come up. Um, but I think that like it's really nice to just be like, if I just like connect into my body and relax, I'm probably going to make this process a whole lot easier than like contracting and really like getting in my head about it all.
Yeah. And it's it's like I feel like I see all these videos on on the internet of people like screaming at a pregnant woman to relax. It's like
And
I
you're like,
can't.
that's not helping.
Yeah. Like I cannot. When
Yeah.
that really is like most ideal, but it's so I can imagine it very difficult, especially in that setting,
Yeah.
you know.
You see that, and that's why it's so smart to just be like, let me just really choose providers that actually help create that environment. Like our
Yeah.
doulas are like, okay, we're bringing all the fairy lights, you know what I mean? And like, here's the music and everything's dim. And I'm like, oh yeah, that feels great. So I think, so it's just, it's such an interesting world, and people have
Mhm.
such different experiences, but I think that, I'm really curious how it's going to go down for me.
Yeah. Do you feel like anything in your human design, like if you looked at this experience for you from the lens of your charts, do you feel like that
Mm.
has influenced how you've approached this or felt during this at all?
It's an interesting question. I wish I could be like, oh, I'm just gonna give birth with ease because I'm a
Yeah.
two. um,
You could tell yourself that, you
I
know.
know, I know. Maybe I'll tell myself that story. I think that like, I think honestly, the biggest influence is that, um, I think that there's like such a desire in my design. I have like a very, actually like you, it's like I've got what we call a very defined mind and head. I have like the gate of wanting to be in control. So like I can get really in my head about things. But I think like there's something about this pregnancy where like we didn't really get pregnant when I wasn't really expecting to get pregnant, wasn't really trying, but like everything about it has felt so like meant to be. And it's felt so right that I feel like knowing my design, I'm like, oh, this just feels right. And I'm just going to trust it. And so I think that it hasn't been a pregnancy so far filled with like a lot of birth fear or control or any of it. Cause I'm just like, this feels right. I'm just trusting it. So I think it's been such a reminder of like really tapping into our authority in human design and just honoring it and like not trying to veer away from it. So I think that's been kind of the biggest influence. And yeah, and outside of human design, it's just like being really sensitive to the influences. I have a really empowering, my mom was an OB/GYN and she just like has such an empowering view around birth. So I would say that's probably like the most influential thing that I've had. But yeah, I think it's just been like really trusting that like this is supposed to happen right now and I'm just like along for the ride.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting if we think from a human design perspective of, when I'm around different people in my life and I know their design, I can start to pick up on like why we relate the way we do, or like where I can
Yeah,
feel their energy. And I think it'd be so interesting if there was some way to get like a large amount of data of, mothers and their children. And then once you
totally.
find out the design and look at like, how did that show up in the pregnancy, right? Because you're feeling all of that. Like I think that is so fascinating to me,
Oh my
you
God,
know?
it's the most, and like, and it's been, my mom was or is, she's a manifester. and it's been really fun learning that and just kind of seeing the influence. But yeah, she's been very much just like, this is how it's going to be for you. It's going to be great. It's going to take this much time. And I'm like, yes, I'll take it all, like
Yeah.
it probably would feel different if she was saying those things and it was really disempowering stuff, but she's saying the most empowering stuff that I'm like, I believe you, and like manifestors are really good at like kind of seeing the future, and not in a psychic way, but like they just kind of like see where things are going and they're very impactful. And so like when I think back, like she's actually been so impactful and like in the most positive, empowering way that I could have asked for.
Yeah. Do you like outside of design, like are you getting a sense of the baby's energy, like like
Oh yeah.
the vibe? Like what is it? What is the personality like? What is it feeling
Basically
like?
opposite of me. Um,
Ah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, and again, like this is all to say that like it could totally change and
Yeah.
like who knows. But yeah, I mean, we know it's a girl.
Mm.
And I think it's my partner's really different than me. And I think that like it feels like she's gonna look like me with like the spirit of my partner.
Yeah.
But and maybe not even him, but like she feels very fiery,
Mm.
and very powerful, and very much kind of being like, I'm coming through being like, I have to like be a baby right now. Like I'm kind of the boss. So I think she's gonna be challenging in a lot of really positive ways. I think that someday I might have a child that's a little bit more similar to me, but I don't think she's the one. So we've looked up a few designs at kind of like times that we think she might come. So if to me it feels like a manifestor manifesting generator vibe is what I'm getting. But like again, I could be like totally wrong. Maybe I have like my little identical projector baby, but I don't think it's going down that way this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I I was I think a lot of the kids coming in right now are like that though, right? Like they're so fiery and
Oh
like
my
this
God,
is the
yeah.
mission and like I'm in control, and they're more, I mean, on a psychic level, I will say connecting with babies or kids coming in now, there's so much more, this is my name. Like this is what I'm here to do. And I
Yeah.
feel like before it wasn't that
100%.
aggressive, and this time it's like this is it. And my niece is a year old, and my sister, when she was having, her baby, I was getting that vibe. I was like, oh, this is what she wants her name to be. My sister's like, I don't
Yeah.
like that name. And then she was born. It was so funny as I was looking at her human design chart, and I'm like, her chart is almost the same as me. Our birthdays are a week apart, and we have
Crazy.
almost the same chart. And I was like, my sister and I were great now, but growing up, oh my gosh, I just really triggered the shit out of her. Like I
Yeah.
was so she was very, very different than me. Um, and my niece is like the same as me. And I was like, it's so interesting because I can see how your relationship with your daughter now is going to heal so much stuff between us.
Oh yeah. Oh
It's
my
so cute.
God. That's
So I think
amazing.
that's cool how it, when they incarnate and like seeing like who are they more similar to, and like who in the
Yeah.
family are they similar to, and like that balance.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And it really is so fun to see. And it does. And I so resonate with what you're saying of like kind of that like directness of like, this is my name. I'm coming in. Like it really feels like that. It feels like she came in on her own timeline. She's like,
Mhm.
this is the time. Enjoy. And we're like, okay.
Yeah.
But it's so fun tapping into that. But yeah, it does feel like there's so many powerful kids coming in.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a parent, but I feel like like human design is actually one of the most helpful parenting tools.
Ever.
And I think it's
Yes.
so amazing that, so many more people now are like learning about this and looking at their children's charts, and just having that information to give their child some space to like do it the way that feels aligned for them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, for any parents listening, what do you feel like would be like maybe the top few things to look at in their child's chart,
Mhm.
perhaps to help them, in the younger years?
Yeah, and I just want to like echo how valuable it can be. I think that human design has a lot of powerful applications, but I think parenting is probably the most important because basically, like, often kids express their design so purely. They come out just like living it, and then they often get conditioned out of it, try to become a thing they're not, and kind of return to themselves later in life. And so, when you're able to kind of give kids permission to be who they are from day one, it's just like the most empowering, generous thing you could do. So, there's so much you could look at in your child's chart. I think that I would definitely start with their type, kind of how they best use your energy. It will definitely help you know how to kind of like work with them during the day and bedtime. I would look at their strategy, which is around kind of communication and creating opportunities. It will kind of help you know how to interact with them in a way that's a little bit more in flow. Their authority for sure, even though which is around decision making, even if they're not kind of like making all the decisions, still being aware of that. And then two other pieces is that it would be, and this might be a deeper layer, but looking at their kind of undefined centers. And these are what we call the white shapes in your design. And they're the areas where they're the most sensitive to other people and often can kind of get a little bit taken off track. So it's really useful to know what those are and also know where you might be impacting and kind of like triggering them in that way. And then also looking at their profile, which is really around kind of how they best learn and some of their gifts. There's like a bajillion other things around like how do they best eat, how do they best learn, their strengths and things like that. But like starting with those 5 pieces, I think can be really, really supportive.
Yeah, I think so I've been like really obsessed with environment recently. And because you learn about this and you always think about, oh, when I was a kid, I did that.
Totally.
And for me with everything in my chart, but for me, the environment, I like brought it to my mom. I'm like, okay, she used to think there was something wrong with me because I never wanted to go outside. I just locked myself up in my bedroom. I literally would just get in a little corner in my bedroom, close the door, turn off the lights, and I wanted to stay in my cave
Oh,
forever. And she was like, thought something was wrong with me. Like, you need to go outside, you need to play with the other kids. And I was like, I am a caves person,
yeah.
but for me, I've been really obsessed with that recently because
Yeah.
I feel like it is something within my chart that is so directly connected to nervous system regulation
Yeah. Totally.
for me.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's something that people don't talk about as much. I mean, I know it's a deeper layer,
Yeah.
but I wish that I had learned that early or paid attention to that earlier because I'm implementing this more now. I
Hmm.
live in a house now that's very open and all white, and like I love all the spaciousness, generator, like I want spaciousness.
Yeah.
But I started to feel really off and I started to realize I don't have a cave.
Mm. Yeah.
And then when I started playing with like a cave and I made myself a cave, it has been night and day for me with
Wow.
like my nervous system. So I feel like with kids too, I would be curious. And I was bringing this up with my friend. I was going over her baby's chart with her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would just be curious, like knowing this information when it gets a little bit older and wants to pick out things in her bedroom. I think
Yeah.
about me telling my parents, I've got one of those nets that made you feel like you were like a butterfly because I wanted to like be in
Totally.
a net, living in a net.
Oh,
And I think
yeah.
it's so cool to see how all of that plays out. And I think like bedrooms and environment, like that feels like a really
Totally.
cool piece to dive into as well.
Yeah, and it's so, and I appreciate you saying that because the founder of Human Design Raw would say, don't ever bring up the environment until somebody's 30. Um, which is like really interesting because I just taught a course, we dug deep into environment, and it was like it really did show up when people were pretty young, and so like I definitely understand like it will become more impactful as we get older. But even like especially when like a kid's sick or not doing well, like putting them in their ideal space can be really, really useful. So I do think it's a really interesting piece to look at. And like my environment in human design is called kitchens, which is basically all around being at like the center of things. And like my favorite thing, I just like wanted to throw parties all the time, be the center of it, like just be the center of attention. I was like always performing, it's just like,
Mhm.
it's so funny kind of looking back and being like, oh, like I just was already creating that space for myself. So yeah, I mean, the recommendation in human design is not to explore it until later, but I do think there's a lot of value in exploring it earlier because like all things in human design, kids often express it so purely
Mhm.
because there's just like not a whole lot of conditioning yet. And so supporting them in that would be really useful. And especially for you because of like all the sensitivity. And I think especially with all the direction of your arrows, like your environment is like not a place that you're meant to just like tap into sometimes. It's very much meant to be a place that like you have access to all the time, And so having your parents know that or a parent know that would probably be quite useful.
Yeah. And I feel like with business too, right? Like I feel like if I look at your business now
Yeah.
knowing that it's kitchen, like it has a kitchen's energy, right? There's like it really does. It's like a big everybody's coming in, like
Yeah,
you all get your blueprints, like it's very
totally.
interactive. There's the
Totally.
alchemy component, which I feel like is huge with the kitchens, like all
Totally.
of that alchemy.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been playing with too in my business where like where things feel like they get out of balance is when I don't have like I need a cave within my business, like
Hmm.
or I need that 2-4 bit.
Yeah.
Like I
The
got a
balance.
hermit in my cave and then I can come out. So I feel like that's
Totally.
another really interesting application too with the
Totally.
environment.
100%. Yeah. And I even think of like, I just was like teaching this course. It was like almost 200 people and I would like often go over because there was so much to share, and like it would be like 3 hours or whatever. And
Mhm.
they're like, Erin, how are you like still talking? Like, I have so much energy. You know what I mean? Like everyone's here. This is so fun. So like it was just like so allowed me to tap into the kitchens piece in a way that like one-on-one work doesn't do,
Yeah.
and so it was kind of fun to just be like, oh, like being in the midst of a group where things are just happening and everyone's being transformed in this way is so exciting as a kitchens person for me.
Turns you on, it's like
Oh
all the
yeah, I'm like, I
energy.
can't stop. Yeah.
I didn't know that he had said not until you're 30 to start exploring it. And I actually want to touch on that. Like, you know, when I hear stuff like this, okay,
Yeah.
I have ish with with like,
Be honest. Yeah.
honestly, particularly the digestive stuff, because I don't remember if I had told you this like when I had a reading with you, but
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I struggled with chronic illness for so long. Like it has been the main thing of my life,
Mm.
again and again and again, and I always knew food was so connected. And when I started eating cold thirst, like, here I am a decade later after like hundreds of thousands of dollars with Eastern, Western doctors, every approach, clinical trials, like, and I eat cold thirst and I'm like, wow, all my issues just went away. And I thought, like, holy shit, I wish I had like known this, implemented this so much earlier. And so I know, and I don't know if that's a quad right thing, because I also have heard Ross say, like, if you're quad right, like the digestive type is more important earlier on. But
Mm.
I think, and especially with the kids coming in and how sensitive their bodies are, like, I feel like their nutrition needs to be so different. Their bodies are so different. Like, I guess my offer to anyone listening, like, is, okay, I know he said those things, but isn't there any room for adjustment with changing times?
Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
one, I definitely know what you mean. One, digestion is the first piece that he said. So that's a really good piece to go look at with kids for sure.
Mm,
It's kind of just like a building thing. It's like once their
yeah.
digestion is kind of like aligned, it's easier to
Hmm.
go into environment. But I totally agree. You know what I mean? I went through a very traditional education. And I think that I was so often frustrated by how kind of this very disempowering lens that human design was presented through, because we're living in a different world than we were when it came through. And I think that we need different things, and he would say all these things about like manifestation, but like he was using different language than we use now, and so like I just think my approach to human design in general is like take what feels good, supportive, useful, like let the rest go. If you like take in a piece and you're like, I kind of want to adjust it this way, like do it. Like I think that like
Yeah.
my thing is like if it's helpful, amazing. That's the most important piece. So I do think that like and I'm sure so many, traditional human design teachers would be like, Erin. But I just think that like we're at a different time. And I think that human design can be the most empowering and expansive system, but it requires that it's communicated in a way that actually uplifts people. And there are so many ways that it can be communicated in which it doesn't do that, where it's like, oh,
Mm.
you're this type and you can't do this thing. And like, that's just not the purpose of human design. And also like the magic of human design is like it will be informed by the lens we view the world through. And so it's just a good reminder for people to be like so incredibly discerning about where they're taking their information in, to kind of make sure they're taking information from places that really resonate. Like in the course that I just taught, like I had so many people be like, I got a reading 10 years ago and I was like, I hate this system. You know what I mean? Like, because they just heard stuff that was like, didn't feel good because of the way that it was presented. And so I think it's just like the presentation and the person communicating is really going to make quite a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in this course you just ran, was there something that you felt like people were most interested in? Like a piece of human design that you guys are spending the most time on, or people are most excited about?
Yeah, I think that God, we covered so many pieces, but I would say the piece that our very last piece before we closed was around the variables and the arrows. And I think people were really excited about that because as you've probably discovered, like it's really inaccessible. And like I see all this information on Instagram where I'm like, that's totally not what Rod taught. Like everyone's
Hmm.
interpreting and like whatever. Like it feels good, great. But like there's so much depth to them and there's such a lack of knowledge and accessibility. I went through this very traditional education where I went through an analyst program for many years. And then after that, I was like finally able to take a 3-year class on the arrows, but only because I went through that thing. And so like, I think that like I've gone so deep into it and I felt so excited to finally have the opportunity to kind of teach on all these pieces that I think that people just have not been able to access. And so that I think was probably one of the most exciting pieces for me to teach on. And I think like one of the most exciting pieces for people that receive. They were just like, I literally would have paid just to have that class. You know what I mean? I think so. That I think was such an exciting piece for people because it really is such a deeper layer. And it's one that there's just so little accessible information around.
Yes. I mean, the amount of time I've spent trying to create something
Hindsight.
that might pop
Yeah.
up on Google. I'm like on page 27 about quad right. And I'm like, this doesn't exist. And I guess I mean, I don't, why do they make it so hard to access when it's so life changing?
I know, I know. I think that like the idea is that when you're integrating the other pieces of the design, like when you first do that, then the information around this stuff will become much more impactful. So it's like not people don't like want them to jump into it immediately because they can get like kind of obsessed with that and like forget about the rest of their design. So it's kind of more around like trying to control the order of things a little bit, mostly because of the impact it will have on people. But I don't know. There are lots of like weird locks and chains around human design, and
Yeah.
I think that it's obviously we're seeing things change and people are making it more and more accessible, but it's also has its downfalls where people are making it accessible, but they're also speaking stuff that like they're kind of just making up, So it's like it's an interesting balance. I do think that that is a piece that I really wish there was more accessibility around because, like you said, it's really transformative.
Yeah.
And especially around lifestyle and how we move our bodies and what we're motivated by and how we exercise and spaces and the digestion and all the things. So I think it will only be made more accessible from here, but yeah, it's really it definitely is a rabbit hole that a lot of people like aren't being able to access, which is so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, would you be open to like giving a brief overview of the arrows?
Of course. So the arrows are the 4 arrows around your head. And they kind of reveal all these deeper layers of human design. And honestly, they're like a whole world into themselves. Like if you look up a human design chart, you're actually not all going to see all the layers underneath it. So the very top layer the very top arrow is around how you best digest food, and also around your strongest sense. So if we're going to use you as an example, like you're not really meant to be super rigid in how you eat, it's very much meant to be more in the flow. For you, it's about eating food that's colder and below body temperature, things that cool you down, even people that cool you down. You already run a little bit warm. And then your strongest sense is just like, which makes sense based on all that I know about you, is like you're just super sensitive to basically the vibe and the feeling of wherever you go. And so like if you're eating in a place where like the vibe isn't right or doesn't feel right, it's going to be pretty hard for you. And so like just really tuning into like, let me eat when I'm in the flow, like also things that cool me down and when the vibe feels right. Makes
Makes
sense.
sense. I mean, yeah, definitely makes sense for me.
And again, like if it doesn't make sense, great.
Mhm.
I think that like human is like this is a piece that is meant to be introduced a little bit later on. So you might
Mhm.
find that like when you kind of integrate your type and strategy and authority, this stuff might actually start to make more sense. The bottom left arrow speaks to how we best move our bodies and also our ideal environment. And so for you, you're not meant to be super rigid in the way you move your body. You're not meant to be like, okay, 8 a.m. every day, I'm at the gym, I'm doing this thing. Like it's probably good for all of us to move every day in some form. But I would say for you, especially when you're stressed, it's really good to sweat it out. But just like incorporating a little bit more flow to it, like really, and just like really paying attention to kind of what your gut is pulling you towards. Um, Also, when it comes to spaces, like the right spaces for you are often the ones where you walk into them and you just kind of feel like you want to like sit back and watch it all go down, like the ones that really kind of relax you and you really are inspired to become a witness. And your environment, like we've talked about, is caves. And so basically what that means is that like Christina doesn't have to live in a cave. It just means like having a really kind of cozy, protected space where she can shut the door and she knows that no one's coming in, or she's controlling who's coming in, is probably going to feel very safe and secure for her. And so always having a cave kind of space you can retreat to can be great. And it might even look like going to a restaurant and be like, I'm going to sit in a booth because like I know that like no one's coming up behind me, and I'm not going to be in wide open spaces all the time. So it's not about being in a cave all the time, but knowing, like you said, how regulating it can be for you and how restorative it can be to kind of be able to have access to that space.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
The other, I guess, related to that is I realized like I've always been so jumpy.
Of
And all of
course.
my friends in like middle school and high school, it was like a big joke. Everybody would jump up behind me and I would scream. And I realized,
Mm,
it was just such a big reaction. I was like, I like my back has to be protected. Like that's so connected for me. I just
right.
can't.
Yeah. And there's just something being like, I just like I'm creating a situation here where like I know that no one can come up behind me. And so I'm able to relax.
Yeah.
So those 2 arrows on the left side are very much about kind of getting your body aligned. It's like, how can I eat and plant myself in spaces so I can like get my body just like right on track? The 2 right arrows are a little bit more around your mind and how you perceive things. So in general, because both of yours are facing right, you're like not meant to be a super strategic person, not meant to be super like I'm dialing in on the details. Like you really have a gift of taking the wider view and really kind of perceiving very subtle things that a lot of people miss. The bottom right arrow speaks specifically to our view, how we're meant to look out at the world. Have you dug into this?
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit.
So the view, your most aligned view is called personal. It basically means that you're meant to kind of look at the world through a lens of like divine selfishness. You're like, what do I want to do and how do I want to do it? And like just really trusting what feels good to you and not concerning yourself with what anyone else is doing. Where you can get pulled off track is power, where it's like, I'm gonna like do this thing because maybe it will get me this thing, or maybe it will like move me up in the hierarchy in this way. But like it becomes really disconnected from just like what you want. And so you're
Mm.
really kind of meant to look at the world through a lens of like, how is it going to affect me and what feels right to me, and not kind of getting lost in just like comparison or improvement or all those things.
So what's the other option?
What do you mean?
Like if people are not right, are they not
Oh,
personal? Or is that a
there's
deeper
6
layer?
options.
Oh, there's 6 options. Oh wow. Okay. What are some of the
Yeah.
other ones? So I
Um,
have a
oh my
comparison.
God. Yeah. So like for me, my view is called probability.
Mm.
And it basically means that like I'm kind of meant to look at the world through like a pretty practical lens. Like I can like dream of all the things, but like where I can get pulled off track is when I get pulled into possibility, which basically means I'm just like a little bit fantastical. I'm like, I shall win everything. You know what I mean? And like, and there are no limits. And I just kind of like don't have my feet on the ground. And so for me, I can be super gullible and like, and I totally resonate with that. And so like, it's just coming back to the practical piece and be like, I just know the right decisions for me are kind of driven from a place of just like feet on the ground, you
Mm.
know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate, but yeah, it makes sense.
You get it. Yeah.
I'm like very
Um,
feet off the ground.
totally. And so like they're just like, and so it really, our view is a piece that just reveals a spectrum and
Mhm.
a kind of spectrum that we're going to bounce in between inevitably. And it's useful to know where you can get distracted, because it basically means that you are never meant to make decisions from your distracted view. Does that make sense? So like for you, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not here to make decisions from like power and just trying to like compare myself and like just fit in and do what I think I'm supposed to be doing. Like it's all like from a personal place, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's just like I find it most useful in that. And like I just like notice when I'm like, oh, I'm just like being so hopeful, like just like so overly hopeful here, where I'm like, I don't care if we write anything down. And I'm like, let me just come back, you know what I mean? And like really
Mm.
check in and make sure that I'm really grounded in how I'm showing up.